the finals incoming, right? And it's like they know that they cannot afford any deaths. For both of these teams have to have deathless runs to be able to be competitive with one another, because that is the caliber of competition we are looking at here.
Yep, these are the best in the business right now. Perplexed versus Echo in our first game of the finals. Our championship Sunday really is getting going here in Plaguefall.
All right, so let's see the first game of this final here between Perplexed and Echo. As I said earlier, Perplexed has the fastest time in this dungeon compared to Echo, who did play this dungeon once on the very first day, but they had some issues as Salia was basically soloing a rare mob as everyone else was just basically dead, and Salia just had to line of sight going back and forth, finishing it off. So some issues on Echo's side, but we also saw a lot of other issues previously by other teams as they reset the boss, wipe on the first pull. So definitely lots and lots of things that can go wrong in Plaguefall.
Yeah, it's kind of really uncanny. We're not used to Echo making all these small mistakes, right? Like, it's so weird to see them see it happen to them over and over and over again, because they really haven't been that clean all weekend. It's just been happening to them over and over again. But the thing is, they've been good enough, even with the small mistakes, to where all of the teams that they've played against, they've been able to just beat with superior gameplay, even with the tiny deaths. But against Perplexed, we saw that earlier today, that's not going to be enough in any case whatsoever. So it has to be lights out gameplay from Echo if they want to have any chance of taking Perplexed on here.
Yeah, so it looks like both of the tanks are gathering this huge first pull here. We see the disc bubble being dropped immediately by Salia as all of those mobs are being gathered. All the defensives are being used as all of the explosives just spawning all over the place. The healers are trying to deal with the explosives while the damage dealers are trying to finish off the trash here, as all of them are going into raging at the same time. Divine Field and Now both trying to kite out this pack, as the Ring of Peace is also coming out by the monks, helping them with the kiting. But the mobs need to die very soon. There we go, actually died at the same time for both of them. How close.
That was... They died at the exact same time. That was really insane. And I was gonna say, it seemed like Echo was doing a better job controlling the mobs. They just didn't have quite the same overall AoE damage there on that pack. They weren't quite as clean in pulling it down. But the fact that Now was able to keep those mobs grouped together at the end of the pull, whereas from Perplexed they actually had to like spread them out a little bit, it allowed Echo to kill the pull at the exact same time from them. Now, both teams opting to go for the same strategy here. However, it looks like Echo has already pulled the boss, while one of their DPS players, Mirez, has gone down to pull the 2 Plague Boars into the boss to get a little bit of free extra damage on the boss. Perplexed still hasn't quite pulled it yet, so it's going to be a tiny bit of an advantage for Echo here going into the first boss.
And Echo also is using their Bloodlust for this boss. They didn't even use it for this very first trash pull, so they're having extra damage on the boss. And now we see an innovation here coming out of Perplexed. They're pulling the boss up this area here instead of at the entrance like we see all of these other two teams are doing, and Echo is doing as well.
Look how many Plague Borers they have. They just don't have the 2 from the front. They have the 2 from the back as well. They've got all 4 Plague Borers there. Is this just going to kill the boss instantly? How much damage is that going to do?
The boss is dropping incredibly low. You can see how much lower he's dropping because of those debuffs that are being applied by the Plague Borers when they explode. But Echo's still slightly ahead because they were engaging the fight first, and they also had the Bloodlust advantage, just getting this extra damage. So I really like this Perplexed strategy here, getting this extra damage off. But because I think if they would have had the Bloodlust as well on Perplexed side, then this strategy actually might have been faster. But that tiny difference, because Echo managed to do this first big pull without it, just gave them a little bit of an advantage here in the boss damage.
Yeah, and that on top of the extra setup time required to pull those extra 2 Plague Borers from the back, Echo got 10 to 12% of the boss's HP down in that time as well. So I really like the innovation and the strategy to try to make it go faster than before. And maybe they were even like saving this strategy for later on in the tournament too, because we've seen plenty of Perplexed Plaguefall runs earlier on. But yeah, it just didn't quite do exactly what they wanted to do here without having that Bloodlust, like you said.
Yeah, we do have a 4% trash difference in favor of Perplexed though, so maybe that is something that is going to go in their favor later on, even though they did finish off the boss later. But now they're dealing with these slimes. These slimes can be dangerous because of explosive and raging as well, so definitely want to make sure you deal with all of them as they're spawning, and that's why we also see the Ring of Peace coming out of Swagfist, making sure Divine Field has the ability to kite these mobs as they're all raging at the same time. And now they're going backwards, dealing with some more trash. As far as I remember, the last time they tried to proc that second Pride, the 40% Pride, back there, and then they skipped it by Shadow Melting off the aggro and move on. While Echo, on the other hand, is just moving on. They're not going backwards at all, not dealing with any of those slimes in that boss room.
Yeah, there's a little bit of extra travel time because of Perplexed strat, but the trash that they deal with to get their mob count is so much easier and so much more clumped up than the trash that Echo is currently dealing with that it actually makes this strategy quite worth it. There's a lot less chance of something going wrong with Perplexed strategy here. And they do spawn that second Prideful here. It'll be a very easy Shadow Meld skip afterward because this room is clear. And then I remember before what they did for their trash percentages. They pulled, I believe, just one trash pack here in this next room for extra trash count, but I'm not really sure if they're going to need to do that now with the extra 2 Plague Borers.
Yeah, we'll see. As Echo on their side did wait a little bit there. I think they were just waiting for a certain timing before they were moving on. They are skipping the Plague Binder and the Congealed Slime. Don't want to deal with that damage reduction aura from the slime at all. So they're just completely walking past it as they're proccing their 40% Pride here as well. Looks like they're also trying to Shadow Meld there, so they're just moving on, jumping through this, also using the Ink Cap here and the Fear Sigil to deal with these tentacles. So it looks like they're just going to be skipping this whole area, Shadow Melting off. Good job there, making sure they're not getting hit by Nao's debuff. That's why he was standing still completely, making sure everyone knows where it's going. But it looks like Maris didn't manage to get out of combat, so they have to use out of combat rest to get Maris back up. And this is the first mistake by Echo here.
I'm not really sure I've ever seen them pull off that Shadow Meld skip cleanly. Every single time Echo's gone to this particular section of the dungeon and gone for this Shadow Meld skip, it's gone wrong for them. And I don't know what they could do to fix that, but it's just something that's a problem. This time, at least Azalea didn't have to solo the mini-boss down, but yeah, just the extra 5 seconds on the board is pretty unfortunate for them. Perplexed now getting to this bomb section of the platform, and because they used their Shadow Meld to skip that second Pride earlier on, they're going to actually have to deal with these tentacles, but they do it in a pretty interesting way, right? They split up the 2 Plague Borers, 1 for each tentacle, and they die pretty quickly on their own without them having to commit any major damage to them.
I'm not actually sure if this was intentional, because I remember them completely skipping those tentacles in the past, if I remember correctly. It is 2 days ago that they played this dungeon, and they might have just switched up their strategy as well. So I might be wrong on this, but I think they might have still been in combat with this tentacle unintentionally because of what happened, but not completely sure. As they're now gathering the trash here in this second boss area, they're gathering everything on top of each other except the Congealed Slime, because of course they don't want to deal with the damage reduction aura again.
Yeah, but there's going to be a slight difference in strategy here between Perplexed and Echo. They're both going to be spawning this third Prideful, but Perplexed is going to have a much easier time dealing with this third Prideful because they still have that mini-boss up at the top of the staircase in order to help deal with it. It, of course, spawns 2 of those Plague Borers, which is why they've left it alive, and then they'll cleave down both the mini-boss and the Prideful with the Plague Borers. However, Echo is still further along in the dungeon here. They just have now spawned the Pride. Perplexed only just now spawning the Pride, so about a 10-second difference or so in terms of where they're actually spawning their trash. But keep an eye on how useful this particular strategy is here. The Manifestation of Pride is going to be pulled up towards the mini-boss eventually, and then they'll be able to easily cleave it down once those Plague Borers spawn.
Yeah, and this is interesting as well because of the way they killed the trash, they cannot actually use the haste zone that was dropped by that red slime. So they have to move the Pride away. Can't use that extra haste because of the boss jumping around from platform to platform. They don't want to pull that boss. And as you mentioned, Perplexed going backwards with that Pride mob, making sure they kill the mini boss on top of the Pride, just getting some extra efficiency here, cleaving 2 high HP targets down at the same time.
And of course, Ashine is also playing the Necrolord anyways, so he can suck up that red pool on the ground and give his team the haste buff anyways. But yeah, not having both haste buffs available to you doesn't help too much. But look at this. Both teams able to pull the boss at roughly exactly the same time with those Plague Borers going down, with the only real difference between the teams being that extra 4% trash on the board that Perplexed has from being able to cleave down the mini-boss with the Borers. This is going to be neck and neck so far in the dungeon. These teams are both playing fantastically.
Yeah, so they are now actually using it on Echo's side. They actually pulled the boss backwards exactly to this red pool on the ground to make sure they are using this haste zone because they don't have a Necrolord on their side compared to Perplexed. Actually having the Necrolord on Ashine, as you mentioned, well, Fragrance is playing Venthyr, so they don't have any Necrolords on Echo's side, not having the ability to use to absorb that slime for the haste buff. And it looks like they're not playing the strategy that we've seen by so many other teams. So many teams just ignored the Plague Bomb here, just completely ignored it, made sure they used the Disc Bubble plus the AMZ by the DK to just go through that damage, just absorb it and survive. But looks like they're not going for that. Maybe they were... Look, maybe because Sally didn't have Pain Sap, and I'm not sure if you can survive it as the priest if you don't have Pain Sap yourself. So maybe that's why they decided to just finish off the bomb here.
Yep, and that makes total sense here. The bomb's about to go off for Perplexed here. Everyone's going to stack inside the double bubble there, make sure they're totally fine. Personals are popped, nobody goes down. Although Ashen drops a little bit low, but he'll be able to be topped up by Ryson pretty easily there. It is important to mention here that Perplexed did actually lose a lot of boss damage at the start of this pull by having to deal with that one congealed slime that reduces the amount of damage enemies next to it are by 75%. So they still are quite a bit behind on boss damage, but still, how close these teams are, even with that slight inconsistency there, 10% apart. It's going to be incredibly close, and this next section of trash is probably going to make or break the dungeon for both teams.
Yeah, this is so close between those two. I just want to quickly say that it's Ryzen actually that plays Necrolord for Perplexed. Ashan is also playing that Venthyr DK.
Oh, yeah,
so both
right.
of the DKs playing Venthyr. It is Ryzen, so their healer who switched to Necrolord, making sure they do get those buffs. But yeah, both of the teams moving on to the same trash area as well. They're taking a little bit of a different path, but both of them going into this middle area, dealing with this middle trash pack. It can be dangerous. They're all low HP here, those mobs, because they're fighting each other, but still a lot of HP left on the mobs, and you also have Raging as well as explosive that you have to deal with. And this whole platform is just very, very tiny. So with the pools that are spawning here that even further decrease the amount of room that you have, can be causing some issues.
Yep, Echo dealing with the pull a little bit more cleanly than Perplexed. It's going down about 10 seconds earlier, but still, it's still neck and neck here. Now, of course, there is still a difference here. Echo needs to go off to this side pack in order to get a little extra trash percentage that they need before they can complete the dungeon, whereas Perplexed can move straight along to these double ambusher packs in the middle. And I know they've done it in the past, but with how close this dungeon is, you have to wonder, are they going to be going for the triple pull here with the ambusher into both of these packs? If they're able to pull that off, it'll secure them a significant lead, and there you go, Divinefield leaping into the other pack, Ryson knocking it away into the other pack as well, so everything is nice and stacked, and they'll be able to AoE this down. And this is Perplexed securing a significant advantage, able to get that trash lead, going to be spawning this fourth Prideful for the third boss very easily, while Echo is still cleaning up some of the extra trash percentage they missed from not going earlier on in the dungeon.
Wow, that was actually so beautifully done by Perplexed there. The way they gathered it up and the way they just delayed their different kinds of utilities that they have. First, we saw the stun coming in by Swagfist, then we saw the Fear Sigil, we saw the Dragon's Breath by Wolf's Disco, making sure they're interrupting all of those casts that are coming out of these trash mobs. Just beautifully done. And the way they stack them up exactly on top of each other as well. Really, really well done, as they're now dealing with this Pride mob, the 80% Pride mob. So yeah, this was a pretty big advantage that they now got from doing this pull specifically. And now they also have the Pride buff for the boss, making sure they kill the boss a little bit faster, while Echo, on the other hand, just doing the same thing in more pulls, just everything a little bit slower as they now proc their Pride mob.
It's also important to mention that Perplexed did commit their Bloodlust to making that pull happen and keeping it consistent, whereas Echo has the Bloodlust available for the boss, which is significant on Tyrannical, right? Bosses take a long time to get through on Tyrannical. Even with the gear level these guys have, they have to chunk through a lot of HP. So that will be a big deal. Echo will be able to catch up and make some time with that Prideful buff on the boss. But Perplexed has pulled the boss so much faster. They're going to have it below 60% by the time Echo even has a chance to pull it.
Yeah, and Echo actually struggling a little bit on this Pride mob. It's still 40% HP approximately, and Celia is completely out of mana, dropping low as well. This might be very hard for them to finish as they use their defensive cooldowns, staying inside that bubble from DK as well to make sure they are alright. Alright, Touch of Death being used by Mares to make sure they are not wiping to this, as they now have the Pride, and it looks like they're also pulling the trash pack on top of the boss. So this is going to save them a little bit of time, but still not as fast as Perplexed by just pulling all of this trash together.
Yeah, I mean, this is really just going to show you the different trash strats that both teams are going for. Perplexed seems like they have a little bit more efficient way to deal with the trash. That being said, Echo is catching up incredibly quickly on the boss percentage. They were 50% behind when they pulled the boss, but but look at the differences now, pulling to within 25% with that burst of Bloodlust plus the prideful buff on the boss. They are definitely catching up, but a lot of that instant burst damage is now gone with the cooldowns running out and the prideful buff running out in a few seconds here. We still have a pretty established lead for Perplexed, not to mention the extra 5 seconds worth of death timers on the board.
Yeah, those 5 seconds might actually matter, considering how close those two teams are right now. The trash difference is not actually going to be a big deal, because I'm pretty sure both of the teams do have enough to go down, right? So it shouldn't be a problem. Perplexed, actually, I think they might need one of the blobs on this side. I'm not really sure. It's going to be close, right? We don't see the exact percentage. Unfortunately, we don't see the exact mob count. But sometimes you might actually want to have those blobs on the side, considering they're also playing Necrolord. But doesn't look like they're going to the right. So just immediately going to this boss room, making sure they're dealing with this trash, with those 2 trash mobs first before they move on. While Echo still fighting this boss, just slightly behind. But it's gonna matter on this last boss room, because Perplexed just has so much damage ready to deal with this one.
Yep, for sure. And we've seen how this room goes. Usually this is a pretty dangerous room, especially on explosive affix, because so many explosives spawn in the back. But you're going to see Rice in here tab targeting pretty much every explosive. It is his job and his job alone to deal with as many of those explosives that spawn. And it's really easy for healers to deal with it now, because they only have about 100 HP. So if you so much as look at them incorrectly, they'll go down. But this is the AoE pull here. I mean, they're just playing so well here, making sure nothing goes wrong for themselves.
Yeah, and we also see how they prioritize the damage on the mini-boss here as well, because the mini-boss does have the most HP, Ikis, who is just standing there teleporting around once in a while. So we don't even see them just randomly AoEing into these devoted ads. They're just making sure they're getting as much damage on Ikis as possible, while just randomly cleaving down the rest of the ads. And very well done, as they are now finishing off Ikis first before they're finishing off any of these other mobs here. So now they just have to cleave them down. Looks like Echo is also in the same room now, and they're also doing the same pull, but just a little bit behind. And they also have another death, so they're up to 2 deaths at this point.
And there you go, Manifestation of Pride now spawned for Perplexed, so they're good on trash count, and all that's left between them and a 1-0 lead in the series is taking down the final boss here. And they're not out of the woods just yet, right? This is a pretty difficult boss. If they aren't able to get through this first phase without beating the second Infected Rain, it could be an issue for their healer, but it'd be really weird to see a team that's been playing as perfect and as just composed as Perplexed has been today to make such a silly mistake like that.
Yeah, they did skip that Pride mob, so we saw them just immediately engage the boss after Shadow Melting off the aggro. We did see the Combustion and PI go onto the mage here on Wolf Disco, making sure they have a lot of damage here. Initially, getting the boss to 66%, so she fades into this intermission phase. This intermission phase always takes the same amount of time, actually, so there's no way to speed this up. But they can make sure they're dealing with these devoted ads while this is happening. The devoted ads can also theoretically be ignored, but because it is explosive, you still want to deal with them, making sure you spawn less of the explosives so the healer can do more boss damage, not having to worry about them.
Yep, for sure. Second intermission, first intermission ending now for Perplexed at 16 minutes and 48 seconds, and Echo's not even in the first intermission yet. All eyes right now are on Perplexed. If they're able to cleanly finish off this boss with no major mistakes, they are going to win this first game. But this is going to be a dangerous phase. The only offensive cooldown that they have available to them right now is that combustion from the mage. Nobody else is going to be doing any damage here. They're going to have to get it to 33% before the next Infectious Rain, or they're going to be in some trouble. But you can see both Disc Priest Bubble and AMZ being used on that one Infectious Rain so they can keep everyone topped and healthy for this phase. They're now in the second Malignant spawn. If the boss starts casting that second Infectious Rain, this could be a scary scenario, but no dice here. Going into the second intermission, nice and clean, and they'll have everything available for the final phase.
I mean, what a run by Perplexed. I mean, just look at the time. We're just 17 minutes into this dungeon, and they're about to finish off this last boss. 0 deaths by Perplexed as well. Just such an incredibly clean run. I mean, it's really easy. It's really going to be hard for them to make a mistake here. This is the last phase, which is the most dangerous one, though. So still have to make sure they have enough boss damage. They want to make sure they're dodging the tentacles that are spawning out of here, and you still want to deal with those ads. But Perplexed just showing how good they are and how incredibly well prepared, just having such an insanely fast time in this Plaguefall.
And they're showing up when they needed it the most. The best Plaguefall time that we've seen all weekend was a 20-minute and 30-second time from Perplexed themselves. And look at the timer, 18:15, over 2 minutes faster than their best time. They are showing up when they need it the most, Perplexed, taking a 1-0 victory in this series.
Absolutely thrilling performance there by Perplexed, taking the early lead in our finals right now over Echo. And not only is this, a great way to be able to start off this finals as well, Titles, but it's just such a statement from this team that says, that upper finals was not a fluke. We are here to win this thing, and they really showed up here in Plaguefall.
It's funny. I actually think that them winning through the upper finals allowed them opportunities to be able to practice their Plaguefall routing a little bit more. And so one of the things that they changed about their routing is they did all of the trash in the Domino room together in one pull. They were able to pull that off, obviously using Bloodlust for it, but that was a massive time save. The dungeon looked really close up until that point, and then they did the whole entire room together. Had to kind of skate by that Prideful after that, but ignoring that, kind of scary moment, it looked really good by Perplexed. I think that their backtracking is still, Nigger and I talked about it was questionable, but it looked excellent by Perplexed, and it allowed them, on top of the zero-death run like we talked about, to win the first map.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And Bloodlust timers were very interesting throughout this whole series, Iro. I mean, I believe it was the very first pull, they had different timers for Bloodlust.
Yeah, committing the Bloodlust to that first pull definitely lost them a lot of time, right? It seemed like Perplex was behind when we got to that first boss because they didn't have Bloodlust for the boss, and Echo was just kind of destroying the boss quickly. But just the better pathing throughout the dungeon and the more clean execution from Perplexed is what won them this dungeon. I feel like Perplexed is just on a completely another level today. The only deaths they've had all day today were 2 deaths at the very end of a boss. That's it. They've been completely clean other than that. If they're able to keep that up, you know what? I'm going to agree with Tettles. If they are able to keep that up in this next dungeon, it's going to be 2-0.
Yeah, I think one of the deaths, wasn't it right as the dungeon was ending and that missed it here in Asaya as well? So it didn't even count for the timer. So actually just ridiculous there. And, it's been very interesting looking at how this team has kind of grown over the years and stuff as well, Nagura, because it's not the same static 5 players. They've steadily been, changing their roster around and building up their rapport both on pushing live keys and on, MDI.
Yeah, I mean, this team has been doing so well in the past as well, but they were just always falling a little bit short compared to Echo, right? We always had Echo, or formerly Wunderbar, just always beat them in that final, but it was always incredibly close. They always were just improving a little bit from a cup to cup, and now it seems like they are at the same level or maybe even overpassed them, as they already won a series against them earlier, and now they won the first game against them in this final. So that is incredibly impressive by Perplexed here. And this next dungeon that we're going to see as well, it's going to be Spires of Ascension, where they didn't quite beat the time versus Echo in the time trials, because they got number 2 while Echo got number 1. But in the tournament, we saw them have the same time as Echo did in the time trial. So we know they can have the same time there as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And to start breaking down some more of that Plaguefall, a bit of routing differences, Bloodlust timings. What do you want to go over here?
Honestly, I think that we just have a lot of Perplexed stuff to highlight. Echo was doing a lot of really good moves. I felt like their first pull was excellent, but then Perplexed started doing some, as their namesake would say, perplexing stuff. First and foremost, it's tanking Glob Grog on that little island. That was kind of weird to me. I do think it's actually really good whenever you put it in the perspective of they still have all those blobs available to them in the middle of the area. They had the Plague Belchers walking around. And so it makes the blobs that spawn on Glob Grog have to funnel in. So they're able to get good Ring of PCC and Frost Novas and stuff like that on it. But then they completely skip the second area. And you're like, where are they going? And they do this M0 style skip, which allows them to not have to pull any of the trash in the second area, which is normally deemed pretty efficient due to the Plague Boars, but they got the Plague Boars in the first boss, so it didn't matter. Then they're like, all right, we're going to do this even more wild pull. And they're able to pull triple ambusher on a raging set of affixes, which those ambushers, for those who don't know, they melee your tank so incredibly hard. I was shocked that they were able to pull all 3 together like that, and they were able to pull it off. Of course, they committed their Bloodlust, but that saves them effectively to a second pull. So that's the biggest time save they could have had in the dungeon. Their Plague Boar mini-boss stuff, I'm not super hot on it, but I thought it was okay. I felt like there was just like a lot of. I think that there was like an unnecessary time loss, like the melding off of the Pride, but like, eh. I do think that this was a great run by both sides, though, and like not to put down Echo. I thought that their run was good. Perplexed just had some really weird stuff that I think that it was easier to like look at and talk about. Like, oh, well, this is a wild pull right here.
Yeah. Well, I think it even speaks to how much more this dungeon can continue to develop. You know, if you're already seeing that, was it 18 minutes or so timer for the dungeon, and you're still seeing areas where they think they could be a little bit faster, I think 2 weeks from now, it's just going to become even more insane at how quick these teams are going to be going. So let's redirect our efforts as well, Nagar. We're talking about Spires of Ascension going to be our next dungeon. And of course, our finals is going to be at best of 3 here. So Fortified, Spiteful, and Grievous.
Yeah, so they actually had already played this dungeon against each other earlier, and Perplexed won, basically having the exact same time as Echo had in the time trials. While Echo, on the other hand, they had lots of issues in their run on the tournament. They had 9 deaths in total, just losing players here and there, and just not having a good run at all. And considering that Echo didn't have enough time to practice this dungeon more because they had to play the lower bracket, they didn't really get to address those issues at all, having to focus on winning that lower final, making sure they prepared for that one. Just probably didn't have the time to address the issues. And Perplexed, they had the time since they won the game or the series against them earlier. So yeah, it's really probably going, or it's looking as it's going into Perplexed's favor. As Teddle said earlier, this might very well be a 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, Teddle's just looking better and better with your predictions right now.
They do.
Yeah,
they don't call
I don't
me a
like
Swami
it,
for
but
nothing.
it is true.
That's right. I saw you. You have your tarot cards
I consulted
with you
the
nearby.
tarot cards before
There
this one.
it is. Yeah, and at this point, we've seen some of the ridiculous pulls that are going to be able to be pulled off with the spears, the flavorful Kyrian bonus that comes out of this dungeon, and how much pressure there is on being able to have the damage, the cooldowns, everything needed at the right time. So Perplexed facing their first cup championship of Shadowlands, Echo potentially facing their elimination and their doom. We'll see if they're going to be able to pull it back right now as Game 2 in Spires of Ascension gets underway.
All right, well, let's see if Echo manages to fix their mistakes from last time, and Perplexed, if they can have as clean of a run as they did before, having this insane time, then it's going to be hard for Echo. I mean, if Echo can pull off their time trial time, it's going to be the exact same as Perplexed, but will they be able to do so? The last time, they didn't manage to.
And I mean, their issues started even with this very first pull last time. I don't think they used their Bloodlust on this pull last time. It ended up costing Mirez and I believe Zalia also their life. But you can see Perplexed opts to go for the safe strategy almost every time in this dungeon. They have the Pridefuls for the big pulls. They have Bloodlust for the big pulls as well, as you can see it being popped here for them as well. Whereas it seems like Echo really has that super lower high roll strategy where if everything goes well for them, it should be a blazing fast time, but there's just so many question marks in it. And we saw every single one of those low rolls last time around. So hopefully we can see a high roll from them here and have a good game.
Yeah, definitely. Looks like Perplexed managed to finish this trash pack off a little bit faster, but not that much faster, considering that they were the ones committing their Bloodlust while Echo didn't. So they really didn't save that much time compared to Echo, who seemed to be dealing with the Spiteful a little bit better. They were basically, instead of running down the stairs, they stayed up the stairs, and they were just kiting the Spitefuls in a very narrow circle, which seemed to be saving them a little bit more time, versus Perplexed kiting down the stairs, backtracking, and then having to go back up. It is just a little bit of a time, but still. What is Now doing?
Now going backwards?
Did he double-click?
Hello? He must have double-clicked. That's
He must have double-clicked.
really
That is going to be such a
unfortunate.
huge time. Oh no, that is actually
Well,
insane
then.
because they can't even continue without their tank. They're going to have to wait until he's here. This is such a huge time loss. Oh
Yeah,
no.
well, what I was going to say before now, and unfortunately double-clicked there, was part of the reason they were able to finish that pull at the exact same time was because Blackfist actually saved all of his cooldowns for the next pull. So he had his Weapons of Order, his Schwinn, his 2 stacks of Stormwrath's Fire, although he only used 1, for that next pull. And he was able to pretty much solo all of the damage on it. Now, Wolf Disco did just combust up near the end of the pull and just popped that on cooldown, because it's like a 1-minute cooldown anyways. But it just evened out their cooldowns for the second pull, and it let them deal with that much more quickly. That being said, Echo has now just put themselves behind by like 30 or 40 seconds purely because now, unfortunately, double-clicked on the Angel instead of single-clicking on it. I didn't even know that was a thing, but now I'm going to be very cautious of that every time I do Spire's Ascension from now on.
No, I think when he got... Or I don't actually know how that works. Maybe he... I don't know. We're gonna have to see what happened with now afterwards. But yeah, that was a huge time loss. Perplexed is dealing with that first boss in the meantime. They did skip the Pride. You can see the Prideful, the manifestation of Pride just standing there in the background. They did just leap away after they spawned it and then made sure they used their Shadow Melt, making sure they don't have to deal with it at all because they think they don't need it for this boss specifically. They don't think it's gonna save them any time compared to the amount of time they need to kill it. Well, Echo, on the other hand, now also managed to engage the boss fight, but quite a bit later. They do have the Bloodlust, though, which is going to make up a little bit of the time that they lost.
It'll make up a little bit of time, but it's not going to be enough for it to matter because Perplexed is still 30% ahead on this boss, and that's going to be a lot even in this fortified setting. Very unfortunate that that happened to them. They might even be in the lead right now if that didn't happen to them. So we'll have to see if they're going to be able to clean up those mistakes from earlier and make this a much closer match. Now, because we saw this match earlier today, we do know what the strategies that either teams are going to go with here. Perplexed is going to opt to go off to the left and then to the right to spawn a Prideful, and then they'll be able to use that Prideful on a massive pull on the right side right afterwards, whereas Echo opts to go to the right first, not pulling the left pack at all, and then they'll be spawning the Prideful on the right afterwards and going for a much smaller pull, but then they'll be able to use that Prideful to move on and do a big pull later on. So it's a little bit of like a catapulting thing where one team will go in the first in the lead with the trash percentage, then the other one will take an advantage right afterwards. And the difference not as large as I thought it would be here. Looks like Echo killed the boss about 20 seconds later than Perplexed here.
Yeah, it's approximately 20 seconds that they lost from now just going back. Unfortunately, just misclicking that Angel. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible that they make up for this time later on, but they're going to have an insane run if Perplexed is playing clean. So for now, Perplexed having a really clean run, no mistakes whatsoever. Looks like they're kiting those Spiteful Shades backwards as they're going to the right side. After dealing with the left, as Syro just mentioned, just going a little bit back and forth compared to Echo doing it the other way around. Now we see Divine Field actually, it's not Divine Field, it's a Shine who is gathering up these stealth claws, because if they're stealthed when you get there, then they actually stun you coming out of the stealth. So that is incredibly dangerous for the tank. That's why we see the turtle being used by the hunter, making sure he is the one getting those stealth claws out to make sure the Divine Field is not getting stunned and just straight up dying.
And look how clean and stacked everything is here for them. They're not even using any cooldowns on this pack. Well, actually, they did commit the true shot for Mass Shine here, but that is it. They have their combustion, and they'll also have their weapons order up for the next pull after they deal with his Prideful. So everything will be available for the next massive pull that we see Echo actually just now rounding up. The main difference between the two strategies, as we were alluding to before, though, is that Echo doesn't include the 4 other divers further on, because that would proc their Prideful in the middle of this trash pack, and they'd have to cleave down the Prideful with at least one of these Goliaths here, which is not really a great strategy to do. Whereas Perplexed will proc the Prideful right now, get that buff, and then go on to do a bigger pull than what Echo is doing right now.
Yeah, looks like they're just seeing those shades with the Fear Sigil, also using the Dragon's Breath, making sure they're not getting close as they're dealing with this Pride here. While Echo just now proc their Pride as well. They are skipping theirs though, because they don't plan on doing that big of a pull, so they don't think they need it. They're just completely skipping out, making sure they use that Shadow Melt to de-aggro it. And if you look at the percentage, Echo is slightly ahead, but as Syro mentioned, because they have the different paths in the way they deal with the trash, Perplex is gonna jump ahead in trash again once they do this huge pull with the Pride buff that enables that pull that they're gonna be doing after going to the next platform. So this is still a very close game, but unfortunately, these 20 seconds they lost from now going back might really cost them. We'll see later on as they're on their way to the next boss.
Yep, this is the make or break pull for Perplexed here. They have to make sure they get this done cleanly. They are stacking everything up on this corner, which is a great spot to line aside those other divers in. And now the entire trash pack is stacked up. They have the Prideful buff, they have their cooldowns, and everything is melting all together. And you can see Echo is only just now dealing with the last of those other divers, while Perplexed is now finishing off pretty much the entire pull. They only have those Goliaths left over, and they are going to be ahead in trash percentage once they go down and onto the exact same spot of the dungeon that Echo is.
Yeah, this was an insane pull, actually. It's so incredible that they managed to pull this off, having all of these Goliath mobs here, as well as all of these others that need to be interrupted and dealt with, just incredibly well handled by Perplexed, making sure they're using that line of sight mechanic to gather it all up. That's why they were making sure they're standing around this corner after tagging the mobs, to make sure they're all just gathering up on top of Divine Field, making sure they get all of this AoE cleave damage onto the mobs. As they're now moving on to the next platform, and you can see the difference in trash, 56% versus 48% for Echo. So Perplexed definitely ahead in trash percentage, meaning they can skip something later on that Echo cannot skip. As we see them just deal with these skirmisher champion packs here, while Echo is moving on.
Yeah, but I believe both teams run the exact same strategy on this particular platform. They do this small pull here, spawn the Spitefuls as far away as possible, whereas Perplexed are actually going to have to deal with the Prideful that spawns here as well. That's why they stayed at the bottom of the stairs while Echo did not. They'll be skipping that Prideful, I believe, and then moving onwards to this giant pull that Echo is now dealing with themselves. And this is going to spawn the Prideful for them, but Echo are actually going to have to be careful here. They have to spawn this Prideful, and then they have to skip the rest of the trash, Shadow Meld it off, and go across the bridge all at the same time. So it could be a little dangerous of a scenario. Let's see if they're able to pull that off.
Yeah, you see them run there, use their Night Fae blinks, making sure they go onto this other side. Now, the difficult part here is to actually dodge the stun from the Pride ability. You can see one of them being on Salia right now. They did manage to use most of their Shadow Melds. Looks like Now didn't manage to use his Shadow Meld. He used it just now. Not sure if he managed to get out of combat though, as they all jump down. So when you jump, you just want to make sure that you jump further than 50% of the way, because then those angels are going to be carrying you to the other side of the platform and not to the one that you came from. So as long as you manage to jump far enough, you are going to be fine.
Yeah, I think specifically what happened there is Now was making sure he had aggro on both the Pride Mob and the Praetor pole so that his team could get across very easily with Shadow Meld. Then he leapt and jumped and Shadow Melded right before he jumped so that there would be no issue with proxy pulling anything. That being said, Echoes still are slightly ahead in current dungeon progression, as they'll be able to engage the boss here very shortly once they're ready for it and once they have the cooldowns. But unfortunately, Fragments has gone down. I believe he just must not have had Turtle up for that trash skip there, which is kind of required there, as Mind Soothe isn't quite enough if that other diver's in a bad spot for them.
Yeah, so unfortunately one death on the board for Echo, and a game as close as this, when they're already behind, considering the trash percentage, it's just going to cost them even more. But it's still incredibly close between those two, as Echo did pull the boss earlier, so they're slightly ahead in boss damage here. Still a pretty big difference in trash percentage in favor of Perplexed though, as they're also fighting the boss. Looks like none of the teams are using any sort of or just using the normal offensive abilities they have for this one. Wolfdisc unfortunately getting hit by one of those black orbs you do not want to get hit by, but he is fine.
And look at the difference here in damage percentage. They are neck and neck. Even though Echo was 20% ahead on the boss whenever Perplexed actually engaged the boss, they are catching up ever so slightly. And I think it really has to do with combustion timings, right? I think Wolfdisc had combustion available on the pull and Genji didn't quite have it up. Or I wonder if he's just saving the second combust for later on. I wonder what the deal with that is, because you can see the combustion's available, only just now popped for Genji, so maybe he was saving it for a trinket or something. But yeah, very questionable choice of cooldowns, I feel like there, because using the combust so late means you won't have it up for the next pull right away.
Yeah, Salia dropping incredibly low with the bleed effect from the boss. Oh my god, he just barely managed to lift that last tick of the bleed. Yeah, this boss can be dangerous. I mean, he does charge onto a ranged player, onto a random player, and he just applies this bleed effect that does an insane amount of damage. They both managed to survive though, and yeah, Perplexed killing the boss slightly later, but not too far behind compared to Echo.
You know, I think I'm just stupid and haven't played with a Night Fae Priest before, because he actually just got his entire combust cooldown back in the combustion window with Fae Guardians up. So never mind, I was wrong. Definitely the correct choice to save it for the Fae Guardians there and the trinket. So yeah, dumb caster here. It's the reason I'm casting and not playing, right? Yeah, moving on to the second section of the dungeon. Both teams almost at the exact same time with a slight advantage for Echo, but we know at this point in the dungeon, Echo has a lot more to deal with here than Perplexed does. Perplexed went for their Hail Mary pull earlier on. We saw it. They were able to pull it off. Echo goes for a much bigger pull here where they commit their Kyrian Spear, where they commit all of their cooldowns. And this is going to be the make or break moment for them. They were able to pull it off in the previous matchup between the two teams, but because they were already so far behind, it really didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Right now, with the tournament on the line, they have to get it again. And this is not an easy pull. They pulled 3 packs together here. And here we go. Tournament's on the line here for Echo.
Let's look at what Echo is doing as they are gathering up this insane pull. Looks like they're just waiting a little bit until now is going around getting everything gathered up. And there we go. This is insanely difficult because they have all of these super dangerous mobs. And it looks like Maris went down. They do have a battle rest, but they have to use an engineering rest to get him back up, which might just take a while. And they're just dropping lower and lower. Maris is back up at this point, using his cooldowns as he's coming back up. But this might have just cost him because losing one damage dealer at the very start might just make it impossible to finish this off. Let's see if they can do it.
I mean, at the very least, it's going to cost them a lot of time because you can see he had popped his weapons of order and his Tiger's Win right before they pulled. So he didn't have either of those two damaging buffs available for the pull. That's a lot of damage that he's missing out on. So that pull is going to take an extra long time for them. They're going to have to kite it out. And you can see there's still a Hellion alive in that pull as well. So it's just going to cost them so much. And you can see how much they're dropping because of that Hellion. Their health bars are so low. Whereas Perplexed, they're already on to the third boss. They've taken such a huge lead here because that pull didn't go perfectly for Echo.
Yeah, definitely. Perplexed did a smaller pull because they didn't have to deal with as much trash because they already had such a big trash lead from previously because of their big pull that they were doing with that Pride buff that they had earlier. And that one just went so much cleaner for Perplexed compared to this big pull that Echo was doing here. So Perplexed definitely having an insanely clean run. I mean, 0 deaths at this point. They're fighting Orifrion and they're an 82% trash. So just incredible by Perplexed here. Such an insane performance by them again. While Echo on their side, I mean, of course they're also playing incredible and they also have these insane strategies and doing really well. But just a mistake here and there, having 2 deaths on the board, Maris going down, Fragnance going down earlier in the skip, compared to Perplexed. I mean, that's just gonna... You can't win against them if you're making these small mistakes as Echo.
Yep, I mean, for sure. That's... we talked about it earlier on, and we even said it literally right before this match. Echo have to play lights out to take Perplexed on in this dungeon. And I love this strategy from Perplexed. It's the same thing we saw from them earlier on. They commit this is where they use their Carrion Spear. This is where they use their cooldowns. They cleave down these adds with the recharge anima cast on the boss, not only getting all of their burst damage in on that double damage phase from the boss, but also just using it to cleave down this extra trash percentage they need to cleave off the dungeon. It is such a damage efficient strategy, and it's not part of Echo's strat here. And I just love it. It's such a great use of cooldowns.
I definitely love this, but Ryzen is having some issues as he's completely out of mana here, and it is Grievous, right? So having Grievous on everybody for another 21% of this boss might be a little bit dangerous, as they were just trying to kite out these Spiteful mobs, but some of them going through. I think he got a melee attack by one of them. Divine Field was soaking all of these orbs during the drain phase. And as Tyler mentioned, they did use that spear and pulled that trash on top, making sure they get all of that cleave damage done, which I really, really love this strategy by Perplexed. Executed really well. Ryzen did recover some mana now, so he should be fine to finish up the rest of this fight. And yeah, incredible. This is so dangerous too, because you have so many Justicars that cast Dark Clash on the group, does so much damage. And then you also have the healers as well, the Menders that need to be interrupted. So very well executed by Perplexed.
Echo also opting to add that strategy in of pulling trash on top of the boss while he's in his damage amp phase, but it's going to be a lot less clean for them. They don't have that Carrion Spear available here. They already used their one on that massive pull we saw earlier that went wrong for them, and if they do opt to use their second Carrion Spear here, they won't have it available for the triple mini-boss pull at the end of the dungeon, and we know you pretty much need to have it for that. So even though they're able to get the trash pack down, the boss is about 10% higher for them coming out of the damage amp phase, and it's just not nearly as efficient as the strategy we saw from Perplexed. However, Perplexed now dealing with that final prideful ad that they'll need to worry about in this dungeon before moving on to the final trash pack of the dungeon. And once again, every pull I feel like I'm saying this, it's make or break for the team pulling it, but this really is it. If you're able to get these 3 mini bosses down without them healing, you only have one boss between you and the first MDI championship of the season.
Yeah, they just tried, they got the Pride mob done. They didn't use any offensive cooldowns, of course, for that one. They just relied on Ryzen keeping them alive through the Pride AoE and the Grievous as well. And what a good job he was doing, using some of those AoE defenses as well, healing through it. And now they're doing this insane 3 mini-boss pull, where they pull all 3 mini-bosses together. They need to kill them within 4 or 5 seconds of each other. Otherwise, the other ones are going to be healing to full HP. And we've seen this go wrong already. I think it was PI me, who unfortunately didn't manage to kill him at the same time and had them heal. So hopefully Perplexed managed to do so as they use their Kyrian Spear and they're just fully AoE nuking these mobs, making sure they're killing them at the same time at the very end as well.
Yep, the Kyrian Spear is down, the cooldowns are up, the health bars are melting, and they really need to make sure that they kill all three at roughly the same time. You have about a 5-second grace period once one dies before the other two heals, and they have to do their absolute best to cleave everything down here. With their health bars going below 10% HP, can Perplexed pull it off? And look at the difference in damage. They died within 1 second of each other, but Ryzen needs to get in that corner. If the Prideful spawns on him in the middle of the room, it could be an issue. But it's not. They're all in the corner with the Prideful spawning, and all that's between the first victory of the season for Perplexed is going to be the final boss, Devos.
Now, Echo has the same pull there as well. So they have the Pride, they also have the Bloodlust on their side. They're doing this very same pull. Let's see if Echo can pull it off as well. Now, in the end, even if Echo does pull it off, it's just too late at this point, as they also have those two deaths. We see Ryzen jumping down on purpose, picking up that spear. You can see him picking up the spear right now, using it on Devos, getting that 4% extra damage here, which is worth it compared to the damage that a priest can do in that time. So really nice to see these kind of little, these little things that the healers can do to just get some extra damage on a boss, really using everything to their advantage.
Yep, for sure. And of course, the mechanics of this boss are probably about as easy as they get for any boss, right? Dodge the charge, get in the bubble when he casts the explosion. That's it. Of course, the intermission phase can be a little bit more scary, right? You really have to make sure you hit that spear. But as long as you're hitting those spears and dodging the charges, this boss is not a big issue. Echo, what is going on your side? People are going down over there. They're dying to this Grievous debuff. They have to somehow eat out of it, but I don't think it's going to be possible without too many major issues on the line.
So they actually had Salia die at the very end from the 3 mini bosses that they pulled, and then they were still managing to finish off the pull, and Maris and Gingy were still alive. They went into the corner, spawning the Pride, and then they went out of combat, making sure they used the Shadow Melt, getting the rest back up. So this was actually really well recovered by Echo, considering that Salia went down. It was well done, but still just having more and more issues on their side as they're now up to 5 deaths. And Perplexed, just in this, out of the second intermission phase at this point, they're just nuking the boss, and Ryzen again jumping down, getting the spear, making sure he gets the extra damage onto the boss. Now the boss is activating the second intermission phase. They just need to use the spear one more time onto the boss, and it's gonna be their game to win. And I can't believe how clean they're playing. This is such an incredibly fast run by Perplexed. 0 deaths, and the amount of incredible plays they've been doing. This is just insane how well they're doing.
I mean, Perplexed, what more could you ask for a team? The entire day, minus one single boss. They've had 2 deaths total. They've been deathless almost the entire day. And Perplexed is now only 10% away from taking the first game of the season. Perplexed ended the 2020 MDI Cup season by taking a victory in the final cup over Echo. And with only 5% left on the board, it is going to be Perplexed taking the very first cup of the 2021 season. Perplexed, congratulations. Fantastic play.
Absolutely incredible performance here by Perplexed. I cannot believe how well they've improved, how much they've just been able to, hold off on having these simple mistakes that have ruined other teams in the past. Perplexed riding high off of this. They went through the entire level of the upper bracket, never lost a series, had so few deaths, and they are now our first cup winners of Shadowlands titles. Incredible.
Man. All right. So
and you were right. To be fair,
thank you.